almost just as important as being involved in your cooperative is being involved in the political process. And we all know that cooperatives were born in politics, and we are very engaged with our elected officials because it makes such a difference in how we can run our business. And we try and help them as much as we can, and we look to them for help on our end as well. And so we're honored today to have a political panel with candidates for elected office. And, you know, it's just so important to have candidates for elected office because, you know, I just have so much respect for the people that put their name out there and run for public office, because you put yourself out to a lot of scrutiny and a lot of eyeballs on you. And I just really appreciate the candidates and the candidates that were able to be here and the candidates that were not, that are in Washington, D.C. serving us. So we appreciate all of you for being here this afternoon. So what we're going to do today is we're going to start off with the U.S. Senate race with Mr. Jay Williams, who's with us today, and Senator John Thune, who could not be with us today. And then we're going to go to the House race with Paula Hawks and Representative Kristi Noem. And then we will go to the PUC race with Chris Nelson and Henry Red Cloud. And so that's the order that we're going to go in. And I'm going to invite Bob Saar up to the podium, and he's going to introduce the Senate candidates.
All right, thanks, Chris. A little bit on the format here today. We did a coin flip with the candidates to determine who would go first and who would go second. So we did that with each of the races. So that's been predetermined, and then each of the candidates has 10 minutes to address the audience. And we'll have a timer, and Jay, if it starts getting close, we'll tap you on the shoulder and let you know that. So the coin toss determined, it was determined in favor of Mr. Williams. So Senator Thune is going to go first at Mr. Williams' election, so I will introduce U.S. Senator John Thune. Senator Thune is a senior member of the United States Senator from South Dakota and a member of the Republican Party. He previously served as a U.S. Representative for South Dakota's at-large congressional district. He became South Dakota's senior senator with the retirement of Tim Johnson in 2015. Senator Thune serves on the Agriculture, Nutrition, and Forestry Committee, the Commerce, Science, and Transportation Committee, and the Finance Committee. Because Congress is back in session this week, Senator Thune was unable to join us here today, but he recorded this video message for us to share with you. So now we'll hear from Senator Thune.
Hi, I'm Senator John Thune. Since Congress is in session, I'm unable to attend your annual meeting in person, but I appreciate the opportunity to address everyone from East River Electric by video and to wish you the best for a productive gathering. As you know, it's been a dynamic time in the energy space in Washington, and I'd like to provide a quick update on a few issues that may be of interest to you. Over the recent August recess, conferees from the House and the Senate have been working to conference two pieces of energy legislation that have passed each respective chamber. The end result of reconciling the House-passed North American Energy Security and Infrastructure Act and the Senate-passed Energy Policy Modernization Act would be the first major energy bill in nearly a decade. I'm hopeful that Congress can pass and advance a comprehensive bill that will support modern infrastructure, boost grid reliability, and help update our national energy portfolio. I also want to encourage my colleagues to retain important provisions that promote cybersecurity. As you know, the energy sector faces a growing number of threats, not only from natural events such as snowstorms and tornadoes, but also malicious incidents such as physical attacks, electromagnetic pulses, and cyber threats. I applaud your industry for prioritizing security, especially as cyber criminals seek to gain access to consumer, member, or employee data, proprietary information, or even to sabotage the nation's electric infrastructure. In December of last year, we witnessed one of the first publicly acknowledged cyber incidents leading to a power outage when Ukrainian energy distribution companies faced a coordinated cyber attack. This attack resulted in loss of power for more than 200,000 customers. Events like that are alarming, yet they provide opportunities to prepare processes and technology and to plan a response in order to keep our energy infrastructure safe from potential harm. Congress has also worked to respond to cybersecurity threats, enacting legislation on enhancing voluntary information sharing and electric sector emergency authority. We will be closely watching the implementation of these laws. As chairman of the Senate Commerce Committee, I've worked with my colleagues to monitor the establishment of the voluntary framework of cybersecurity best practices for critical infrastructure, with a focus on relying on the expertise of businesses. Thus far, we've seen some users of the framework turn cyber management into an opportunity, enabling competition and innovation. As threats evolve, we will continue to solicit input on how the government can act in partnership with industry on these issues, and I appreciate your continued input on that matter. Congress has also been working to protect the energy sector from another kind of attack, overreaching rules and regulations from this administration. President Obama has sought to cement his environmental legacy by finalizing rules like the Clean Power Plan Greenhouse Gas Rule, the Waters of the U.S. or WOTUS rule, and a lower ozone standard. Ultimately, these rules will pass burdensome compliance costs on to consumers. The Clean Power Plan is particularly challenging for South Dakota, which generates over 2/3 of its energy from hydroelectric power and wind. This means our options for emissions reductions are extremely limited. The WOTUS rule amounts to one of the largest federal land grabs in history. It would expand the jurisdiction of the federal government to regulate water and could apply to a countless number of small wetlands, creeks, stock ponds, and ditches that are typically regulated at the state level. Property owners and businesses would be hit with new federal permits, compliance costs, and threats of significant fines. Fortunately, both rules are currently being blocked by the courts, but I know the administration is working hard to defend them. It has been challenging to advance sensible energy policy under President Obama, who, for example, has obstructed the Keystone XL pipeline for his entire time in office. In fact, he vetoed it after more than 60 senators supported a bill to approve this routine infrastructure project. I recognize that the Keystone XL pipeline is only one project, but the administration's attitude toward important energy investment has become all too pervasive. We're now heading into the final stretch of this Congress and the Obama administration. As you know, we still need to address several major pieces of legislation, including Zika funding, the Defense Authorization Bill, military and veterans funding, and an omnibus spending bill to fund the government into next year. I'm proud of the numerous accomplishments the Republican Senate majority has achieved thus far, but it certainly has not been without setbacks and frustrations from the Obama administration. As we look to finish this legislation and to gear up for next year, I'm hopeful we will be able to undo or weaken the many federal overreaches that will challenge the energy sector and negatively impact ratepayers throughout your network. Thank you again for your efforts and continued leadership, and best wishes for a successful meeting.
All right, we want to thank the senator for filming that spot, and he did so during a recent visit at East River last week. And I know he wishes he could be here, but as Chris mentioned earlier, Congress is in session, so the schedule simply doesn't permit that. So next up, we'll hear from Jay Williams. Jay Williams is a Democratic Party's candidate for the U.S. Senate. Since 1987, Jay Williams has operated his own business called XL Tech, Inc. in Yankton, South Dakota. He has been involved in the community in a variety of ways, from performing in local theater productions to serving on volunteer boards to most recently performing duties as an elected member of the Yankton School Board. After graduating from Gettysburg High School in 1968, Jay earned a Navy scholarship to attend the University of Wisconsin. Jay served his country in both the U.S. Navy and in the Peace Corps. Please welcome Mr. Jay Williams.
Well, thanks very much, and I'm really happy to be here today to address all you people. I want to tell you a little bit about myself. I'm sure you all know who John Thune is, but probably very few of you know who I am. And I am Jay Williams, and as you mentioned earlier, I am from Gettysburg, South Dakota. I was born there in 1950, and I graduated from high school in 1968. My great-grandfather was the first mayor of that town. He walked there in the late 1800s, and I'm really proud to be from that part, proud to be from South Dakota. After I graduated from high school, I received a U.S. Navy scholarship to attend the University of Wisconsin. So I spent the summers, or the school years, studying political science, actually, at the University of Wisconsin, in Madison, Wisconsin. And that's where I met my wife, Carol, who is here in the front row, and we've been together ever since we met there back in 1970 in Madison, Wisconsin. I spent the summers on active duty with the U.S. Navy as a midshipman. And my last summer, I spent aboard the USS Oriskany in wartime operations off the coast of Vietnam. We spent every day there from sunrise to sunset, launching jets loaded with bombs and recovering them after they delivered their ordnance. At night, supply ships would come alongside and give us more bombs and more fuel so we could do the same thing the next day. This was deadly serious business, and it gave me an appreciation for what war is and a belief that this kind of awesome and terrible power that we wield as the strongest country in the entire world should only be used as a very last resort. Well, after I graduated from college with a degree in political science, I was commissioned as a naval officer and assigned to U.S. Navy Flight School, where I carrier qualified in a high-performance jet plane and earned my wings. And I spent the next 2 years in Naples, Italy, and the 2 years after that in Virginia Beach, Virginia, serving as a search and rescue pilot. And after the Navy, Carol and I volunteered for the Peace Corps and were assigned to Bogota, Colombia. We went down there. Carol was a nutritional counselor for disadvantaged women, and I worked as a transportation consultant for the city of Bogota, Colombia. You know, it's a really interesting experience to live in the third world, where the government doesn't really do much to help you out. You know, there aren't any government regulations down there. And as a result, in Colombia at that time, less than 2% of the sewage was treated in Colombia. So the rivers, as you might imagine, were raw sewage. We went down there with 50 Peace Corps volunteers. By the end of the first year, half of them had got parasites from the drinking water. So, you know, the drinking water that we take for granted here, I just had a nice glass of water here, took it right out of that pitcher there. Well, you couldn't just do that down there because the drinking water was mostly contaminated. You know, if you bought a drink, you didn't want to have ice in it because it was contaminated water. Well, that's not the way it is in the United States, because our government does take care of that. We do have clean water. And that's a really important thing, and it's something that I'm afraid people take for granted. Well, after the Peace Corps, I returned to college and went to Northern Illinois University, where I earned a Master of Science degree in computer science. And that started my high-tech career, which I've been at ever since. I started down in Dallas, Texas, working for Texas Instruments. And then I was fortunate enough to get a job out in the Silicon Valley, working for 2 different high-tech companies. Well, about 1986, my oldest kid was about ready to go to kindergarten. And so Carol and I decided where would be the best place to educate and raise our kids. And we decided, hands down, the answer was South Dakota. So we sold our house, took our life savings, our dog and our 3 kids, packed up and moved to Yankton, South Dakota, where with the help of a Ready Fund loan from the state of South Dakota, we started our business, our high-tech business, which we're still in operation today. You know, when I left the last company I was working for, I didn't burn any bridges. I just told them I wanted to move back to my home state and raise my kids there. So that company went on to do power distribution units. So I worked with them as a consultant doing software and firmware for their power distribution units, which I'm sure probably most of you are familiar with those kind of things. And we did things like load sharing and load moving around, so we could sense power, and we could turn outlets on and off and distribute the load, which I noticed that the East River Cooperative does as well. And I really applaud that. I think that's really a great thing. The East River Co-op, you guys are working to, you know, do conservation, which is a really big thing for energy, and you're moving away from fossil fuels. I think that John misspoke a little bit there. I think you only use 1/3 of your energy is being generated not by clean energy. That is wind and hydro. But that's a really great thing, and I'm glad to see that. And I think, you know, with your values of integrity, accountability, innovation, and commitment to community, I'm sure that that's going to increase to near 100% as fast as you can make that happen. And that's exactly what responsible energy companies should be doing. But to achieve your goals of delivering secure, reliable, reasonably priced power with promoting efficiency and renewable resources and environmental stewardship, you need some help with that. You know, it will be expensive to meet the regulations of the Clean Power Act. And in order to meet those regulations, you're going to need some help, and you're going to need some help from the federal government. The problem is, the United States Congress is currently in a state of disrepair. Our Congress has been unable even to provide the resources necessary to battle a clear and present threat from the Zika virus. Now, that's all political. I mean, there's such political discourse in Washington today that something we all agree on, this Zika virus thing, we all agree on that, and yet we can't get it done. Now, the Republicans blame the Democrats, and the Democrats blame the Republicans. But it's really people not working together. You know, the Republicans put 3 poison pills in there that the Democrats will never agree to. They want to defund Planned Parenthood, they want to defund Obamacare, and they want the Confederate flag to fly over military cemeteries. Well, that's just not going to happen. And those three things aren't related to this Zika virus, and they shouldn't be there. You know, the Zika virus should be passed on its own, and we should be out battling it. You know, and in spite of broad bipartisan appeal for this bill, it's not getting done. And right now, there is a threat that by the end of this month, the government won't be funded and it'll have to be shut down. That is shameful. It's really, really a bad thing. You know, as the number 3 man in the United States Senate, John Thune has to take responsibility for that. I mean, he's been in the Congress for 18 of the last 20 years, the last 12 in the U.S. Senate. You know, and he got elected 12 years ago. He came into South Dakota. He said, you should elect me because Tom Daschle is a huge obstructionist. Well, if he was a huge obstructionist, the Republican Senate is really, really taking it to an entirely new level. They refuse to confirm judges, you know, including the Supreme Court nominee, and that right now we have 89 vacancies in our federal judgeships. 32 of those judgeships are in what they call a judicial emergency. That means they don't have enough resources to handle the caseload they have. That's a real problem. And it's not just judges. You know, the administration has to get people approved by the Congress, by the Senate, in order to run his administration. There's several people that have to be approved. And the Congress, or the Senate, has used the filibuster in the past sparingly to stop those nominations. Carter had 2. Reagan had two nominees filibustered. Bush 1 had 0. Bush 2 had 7. And Clinton had 9. That was the biggest number before Barack Obama. President Obama, in his first term, has had 18 of his nominees filibustered. In his second term, that's risen to 28. So he's had 46 filibusters of his nominees. I mean, this goes beyond obstructionism. And it's a real problem for us as a country. And you know, this obstructionism, this divisiveness is personified by the Republican nominee for president, Donald Trump. Donald Trump came in and he did the classic divide and conquer. He had 17 Republicans running with him for that nomination. He divided them up. He won primary after primary, only with a plurality, not with a majority, so that he ended up being the Republican nominee for president without winning a majority of the voters who voted in those primaries. So here we have the personification of divisiveness in Donald Trump. You know, over the past year, Trump has made statements that expose his ignorance of public policy and his contempt for democratic norms. Here's just a few of the things he's done. This is just in the last year. He's mocked people with disabilities. He's disparaged POWs and Gold Star mothers. He said he will torture captives. He encourages violence against protesters at his rallies. He proposed a religious test for entering the United States. He called for changes to the First Amendment to do away with some of the protection that journalists have in our First Amendment. He called for a judge to be removed from his court case based on his ethnic heritage. And that's just a partial list, and that's just in the last year. He is in no way qualified at all to be President of the United States. The Republican Speaker of the House, Paul Ryan, called his remarks about the federal judge to be, quote, the textbook definition of a racist comment. In spite of all these issues, John Thune still supports Donald Trump. That is disgraceful. And Senator Thune should immediately withdraw his support for this terrible character. If our country is to prosper, we must have a responsible Congress that works together with those who disagree on issues to find common ground, not what divides us. If I'm elected, I promise to do that, and I ask for your vote coming this fall. Thank you very much.
All right, thank you, Mr. Williams, and we appreciate you and Carol taking your time out of your schedules to be here. Yep. Next up, Chris informs me we're going to do the U.S. House, so I'll ask Representative Hawks to please come forward and turn the mic over to Chris.
Thanks, Bob. And we did a flip of the coin beforehand as well, and Mrs. Hawks won that and chose to go second. So I'm going to introduce Representative Kristi Noem. She was reelected to a third term in the U.S. House of Representatives in 2014. She currently serves on the House Ways and Means Committee, which is largely regarded as one of the most powerful committees in Congress. The Ways and Means Committee has jurisdiction over all tax, trade, and economic growth policies. Representative Noem is in Washington today, as well as we've already mentioned, and couldn't join us, but recorded this video message.
Hello everyone, I'm Representative Kristi Noem, and I'm so sorry I couldn't be with you today, but I just wanted to take a moment to say thank you for everything that you do to keep our lights on and our phones charged. You power our homes, our economy, and our world. And in recent years, the American energy industry has come under attack by this administration. Maybe one of the most concerning actions has been the greenhouse gas ruling. It's a proposal that the president admitted would skyrocket energy costs for families. That means that electricity costs could increase by as much as $17 billion nationwide, and 250,000 people could be put out of a job every single year. You know, South Dakotans could be hit harder than most. Already, families in our state earning less than $50,000 a year spend 1/5 of their after-tax income on energy costs. That's double the national average. Many can't even afford to pay any more out of their tight budgets. So we've been fighting hard against this costly regulation. I've helped the House pass legislation to disapprove it. We also passed the Ratepayer Tax Protection Act, which would help protect families and small businesses from the price hikes that this regulation would impose. And through our annual appropriations package, I voted to cut off all funding that would go to implementing the regulation. The challenge is that any bill that Congress passes must be signed by President Obama in order to become law. And he isn't interested in stopping his own regulations. So we've looked at the judicial system. Earlier this year, the Supreme Court temporarily stopped the rule from moving forward until litigation around this rule is finished. I followed up on that with Supreme Court action by writing to the EPA to make sure that compliance deadlines were also suspended while the law was under review. You shouldn't be forced to make expensive changes if the court system is going to overturn them anyways. On top of addressing the regulatory overreach, we have to take a look at the nation's cybersecurity infrastructure. Now, East River Electric has made investments in recent years to help guard your customers against attacks on our electric grid. And I want to be your partner in this ongoing effort. In recent years, we've had to fight to stop, and we also have worked to increase investments into cybersecurity education and research. We also got legislation signed into law that would make it easier for the private sector and the federal government to collaborate against cyber attacks. And in passing the first long-term infrastructure bill in more than a decade, we put bipartisan provisions in place to make sure that our energy infrastructure is more safe, secure, and resilient against modern-day risks, including physical attacks, cyber attacks, and extreme weather. But more must be done, and I am very interested in working with proactive companies like East River Electric to develop a solution that's going to work. So once again, thank you for everything that you do. I know it's not always an easy job, but it's a job that makes so many people's lives a little bit easier. Good luck with the rest of the meeting, and I hope to see you all soon.
All right, thanks to Representative Noem for that, and to Andrew Curley from Representative Noem's office for being here as well today. All right, our next candidate is Paula Hawks. She's a Democratic candidate for the U.S. House of Representatives. Currently, she's a member of the South Dakota House of Representatives, representing District 9. She was first elected to that office in 2012, and since January 11th, 2013, when she was sworn into office. Hawks grew up on a farm near Flanders, and her family now live in Hartford. She's a bank training specialist and a former high school science teacher. Please help me welcome Paula Hawks.
Good afternoon, and thank you so much for asking me to be here. I'd like to express my appreciation to East River Electric for extending this opportunity to all of us to speak with you today. I'm very excited to talk a little bit about my view of energy and electricity in South Dakota and across the country, but before we do that, I want to give you just a little bit of a background on who I am, where I come from, and what I am about. As Chris said, I did grow up on a farm outside of Flandreau. It was there that I developed a lot of the principles that have guided me throughout my life. Things like hard work, a focus on family and community, and building my dreams based on what I want to do and where I want to be, which is what my parents really pushed me to do and taught me was the best way to go about things. And that's what I've done with my entire life. From the farm in Flandreau, I went on to go to school at SDSU to get my bachelor's degree. And that's where I met my husband, Steve. Steve is from West River Ranch out by Faith. And together we have 3 lovely children who are now in school and very excited about that. I have a 16-year-old daughter who's a sophomore. Ruby is actually very excited to be back in school because it means she gets away from her 12-year-old brother, who is not so excited to be back in school. And then I have she's not 6 yet, my 5-year-old daughter who just started kindergarten. And that was like wrenching, a piece of me out of me to send her off to kindergarten, especially when she waved and said, "See you, Mom." I was like, oh, what about me? And we live now in Hartford, where I taught high school science for 10 years at West Central, and I gave up that position when I was elected to the state legislature. And so I've been serving in the state legislature for the last 4 years, and in that position, I have really learned the importance of working together. I am obviously a member of a super minority in the state legislature, and as such, it is absolutely impossible to get anything done without working with everybody, without having the wherewithal to develop relationships, especially with people you don't always agree with. And those working relationships are what help us to move forward and gain progress for what is really good for South Dakota. And so that has been a philosophy for me for the last 4 years and will continue to be a philosophy for me as I move forward. So as we have talked today, as we've listened to some others address issues with energy, I want to talk about my view of energy. And I really don't think that you can do service to talking about that without talking about the challenges as well as the opportunities that we have in South Dakota. First, let's address the challenges. Obviously, there are some big challenges. Number one issue being what I hear from folks involved in industry across the state and in other places as well, and that is the EPA's Clean Power Plan. I would agree that this is a massive overreach by the federal government, and I do support its repeal. I think that we need to take a much more cautious approach to where we're headed, and that we have to bring in all of the stakeholders and have a good conversation about how we reach the goals that we have without hurting the consumer in such a way as this would do. This program, without even having been implemented because it's bogged down in litigation, has already had several ripple effects, which affect every one of us. And when you're talking about those ripple effects, it's not just the consumers, like the folks who are on a fixed income who can't afford a hike in their energy prices, to the businesses who are trying to provide goods and services for the people across the state, to the utilities who are just trying to do their job and provide affordable energy for their consumers. And that is their goal and their mission, and that is what we are all working to try to accomplish. This has also had an effect in the business community because businesses are hesitant to expand development with such an uncertain future. And so we have to find a place and a way to, like I said, accomplish our goals, but do it with the goal in mind, not just the end result. We have to talk about the process by which we get there. And so we'll talk a little bit about that. So as it's bogged down in the circuit court, I hope that they will take a common sense approach to making this work and to finding a solution that's workable. So let's move on from those challenges, and that is the biggest challenge to electricity and energy production and provision in the state of South Dakota and across the country. But let's talk about the opportunities, because when it comes down to it, those are the things that are going to lead us forward. Those are the things that are going to allow us to progress. And so as we talk about opportunities, I think that what we need to recognize is that South Dakota is poised to be an absolute leader in global energy production. We have everything we need here in place. We need now the will and the fortitude to move forward and make it a reality. My approach to energy is an all-of-the-above approach. I do firmly believe that we are going to have to move away from fossil fuels, but that is not an overnight mission. We cannot just flip a switch, turn off the oil and coal, and move over to renewable energy resources as our 100% provision. It's just not common sense. It's not workable. And so we have to have that all of the above approach that involves all stakeholders, from the producers to the consumers. And in South Dakota, obviously, as an agricultural state, we understand and acknowledge the fact that we do better. We are better at generating revenue, and we make more money when we are producers. And so that's what we need to be. And South Dakota is perfectly capable of doing that. From the coal burning plants that we have now that we are making cleaner and making more efficient, to the ethanol that we produce across the state, to hydro and wind. and solar that are in place and growing in popularity. East River Electric in particular has been very good at diversifying their portfolio. Obviously, you guys have implemented many different aspects of energy production, from your clean coal to the hydropower that you take in and use from the Missouri River to the growing wind energy resources that you're making use of as part of your energy production. Kudos to you and my appreciation for the work that you do in making that happen. There is a place, of course, for the federal government in that energy production and provision to the people of the country. However, that involvement from the federal government needs to be one of commitment to renewable energy resources, not rules and regulations that limit and cause higher costs and energy costs for the end user. Another opportunity that we have across the country and in South Dakota is the modernization of our grid. Obviously, there are some problems associated with a grid that is based on a 200-year-old model. And that is the case with our grid today. It is very much the same as what Thomas Edison put together 200 years ago when he was developing electricity on a larger scale. And so when we look at those problems, the problems of intermittency, we look at cybersecurity, which is a huge concern for all of us, and not just in South Dakota or the United States, but across the world, as well as the rolling blackouts that we've experienced in the past, transportation, storage, all of these problems that are associated with an aging grid. We need to find that commitment from the federal government and from our state governments to advance that grid, to modernize that grid so that it can handle and be adaptable to the growing renewable energy resources that are becoming a part of the grid as it grows in popularity and affordability for folks across the country. Obviously, at the crux of the situation and the conversation is affordability for the consumer. And we are all consumers, whether we are part of an electric co-op or we're part of the board or we're part of a farm that's producing, we're all end consumers as well. And so it's a concern for everybody across the board, that question of affordability and how we can protect and maintain that affordability for our customers. This is also a concern for us when we talk about where some of those decisions are being made. And as an agricultural state, South Dakota is well aware of the ag issues that are imminent everywhere across the state. But what we also need to acknowledge is that the Ag Committee is also involved in the decision-making process and the provision of a couple of different programs that directly affect electric cooperatives and electricity production and provision. The two that I am talking about in particular are the two loan programs that are controlled and maintained by the USDA. And those are the Rural Utility Service Electric Program and the REED Fund, or the Rural Electric Economic Development Fund. These are two funds that rural electrics and electric cooperatives depend upon for loans that help them to provide that affordable energy production and provision to their customers. These need to be protected. That's why it's important that your representative makes it a priority to be at the table where those decisions are being made. And that's it should be at the height of our concern as far as representation in South Dakota. I firmly believe that at the root of it all, a representative needs to be answerable to her constituents, not to any political party, not to the powers that be in Washington, but to the people who elected her and to whom she answers. That is what I have done as I have worked through the state legislature in South Dakota. That's what I will continue to do if I have the honor of serving you as your U.S. House representative. I appreciate your time today. I appreciate your attention. Thank you so much for letting me be here today, and good luck with a successful meeting from here out.
All right, next up, we're going to hear from the candidates for the Public Utilities Commission, starting off with Chris Nelson. And I'll just check and see, is Mr. Red Cloud in the room? We weren't certain if he was going to make it or not. All right. So, I'll keep my eyes open in case he does come. But if not, we'll start off with Chairman Chris Nelson. Chris Nelson is currently the chairman of the South Dakota Public Utilities Commission. Chris was appointed January 8, 2011 by Governor Dennis Daugaard to fill a vacancy on the commission, and was elected by South Dakota voters in November 2012 to continue his service for the remaining 4 years of the term. Chris served as the PUC's chairman in 2012 and vice chairman in 2011, 2013, and 2014. Previously, Chris was South Dakota's Secretary of State. Would you please welcome me would you please join me in welcoming Chairman Nelson to the stage? Thank you.
Thank you, Bob. I appreciate the opportunity to spend the entire day with you, learning and visiting with you. I want to introduce my wife in the back, Penny, who's with me, trying to take some pictures. I appreciate that. I want to do just a few things in my time with you today. I want to give you just a little bit of my background. I want to talk about some of my focuses as a Public Utilities Commissioner, and I want to conclude by answering a question. Many of you know that I grew up as a very typical South Dakota farm kid at White Lake. Grew to love agriculture, went off to South Dakota State, majored in animal science, fully intended to farm and ranch for my life's profession, but as sometimes happens, an opportunity came along and Secretary of State Joyce Hazeltine asked me to come and work in her office in Pierre. In 2002, when she was term limited out of office, I ran for Secretary of State and was very fortunate to serve you for 2 terms as Secretary. In 2010, I was term limited out, and at that time, one of the greatest surprises of my life happened when I got a call from Governor-elect Dugard, and he said, you know, we're going to have an unexpected vacancy on the PUC. Would you have any interest in accepting an appointment? And that wasn't on my radar screen in any lifetime, I'll guarantee you that. But I knew 2 things. I love a challenge, and I love serving the people of South Dakota. And so I said yes to the governor, and as Bob indicated, was then elected in 2012 for the remainder of the term, and I have enjoyed every minute of the learning and serving process over the last 6 years. During that time, really frankly for my whole life, I've maintained a part-time farm operation back at White Lake. I am a member of Central Electric. I understand the cooperative system and appreciate what you do and the cooperative system. 2016 is my year for re-election. I've been traveling the state since I announced my re-election campaign back in mid-February, and I've really been talking about 3 things that I'd like to share with you. Number 1 is the fact that I have been tenacious on the PUC in working to keep utility rates as low as possible for the people of South Dakota. And as you understand, we're at a time in an environment when there are a lot of upward pressures on those utility rates. How do we do that? First, as the investor-owned utilities come to the PUC and ask for rate increases, we scrutinize those expenditures and only allow those that are legally allowed by state law. Second, encouraging our utility companies to chase after that least cost generation opportunity, least cost energy efficiency opportunities, while not being afraid to experiment with the new technologies like Central and Sioux Valley are doing with their solar farms, and like Missouri River Energy Services is doing with, as they are right now putting in a 1 megawatt solar utility scale facility in Pierre. So following those particular opportunities. And lastly, as you know, standing firmly with you in opposition to the Clean Power Plan. You know the PUC has been with you in that. And I want to make just one pledge to you today. Politicians do that a lot, but I'm only going to do one today. And that is, if I am reelected, I will continue to stand with you, fight with you against the Clean Power Plan, both at the courtroom and in Congress. And if for some reason that thing happens to survive, work with you to minimize the fiscal damage that it will cause to the citizens of South Dakota. That is my pledge. Secondly, I've been talking about expanding broadband availability across South Dakota. You know, we have in this state what I call the rural divide. Parts of rural South Dakota have fiber optic to the farm world-class service, and their neighbor across the gravel road may have absolutely no internet access whatsoever. And in 21st century South Dakota, we cannot allow that to continue. Agriculture is big business. Students need the internet for their homework. Families need it to stay connected to the world and for the world to connect to us. Broadband is essential for economic opportunity in rural South Dakota. I've focused on trying to close that gap, and we're making progress. Last year, CenturyLink announced that they were going to build out broadband to 15,000 new locations in South Dakota. That's a win. We will not stop. We've got to continue pushing that. And third, and don't underestimate this, I've talked a lot about the fact that I've developed a track record on the commission of making decisions based on fact and law, not on personal whims, not on political agendas, and not on emotional responses. I appreciate the rule of law, and I think that serves you and the people of South Dakota very, very well. Apparently, my opponent is not here today, but he's raised a question in this race, and I believe that you all deserve to know my answer to that question. And the question that he's raised is this. He said, and I quote, "Why do Republicans want to continue using oil?" Unquote. Just let that sink in. And I would answer that question threefold. Number one, the South Dakota PUC does not get to decide whether or not this country continues using oil. That's not in our jurisdiction. Secondly, know that I understand the importance of petroleum products to agriculture in South Dakota. I understand the importance of petroleum products to the tourism industry and other industry. And to moms and dads that simply want to put gas in their car or diesel in their pickup to take their kids to school or drive across town or maybe go on a family vacation. I understand the importance of petroleum products. And third, know that I support American energy. And that may be in the form of oil, may be in the form of ethanol, might be coal, might be natural gas, might be hydroelectric, might be nuclear, might be solar, might be wind, might be some technology that we haven't even seen yet. But as this country begins moving rapidly towards energy independence, something we've talked about for decades, my entire life, know that I support all of the above. I support American energy in all of its forms. Ladies and gentlemen, serving as your Public Utilities Commissioner has been one of the greatest privileges of my life. Quite frankly, I love working for you. It's that simple. And so as I close today, I very humbly and very respectfully ask that for your support over these next, I think, 62 days. Okay, Paula's shaking her head. It is 62. We're on the same page. And ask for your vote on November 8th. Thank you.
All right, well, thank you very much, Chairman Nelson. We appreciate your service and advocacy, and really appreciate you and Penny as well being here today. I've been notified Mr. Red Cloud is not here, but I'm going to go ahead and read his biography just so you can learn a little bit about him. Henry Red Cloud is a Democratic Party's candidate for the Public Utilities Commission. He was born and raised on the Pine Ridge Indian Reservation in South Dakota, home of the Oglala Lakota Nation. For more than a decade, Henry has devoted himself to developing his expertise with renewable energy applications that are environmentally sound, economically beneficial, and culturally appropriate. Mr. Red Cloud is the founder and owner of Lakota Solar Enterprises, which is a 100% Native American-owned company. He is also the co-manager of the Red Cloud Renewable Energy Center. With that, I'll turn it back to Chris Studer for some closing remarks.
All right, thanks, Bob. And thank you all again for being with us this afternoon. And like I said earlier, it's so important to be involved in your cooperative, but also involved in our democracy. So I encourage you, of course, and I know you all will, for the most part, right? You're going to go out and vote. Early voting starts on September 19th, so you can vote early. And then Election Day, of course, is, 23rd? Did I have that wrong? I think, 23rd, September 23rd. And so early voting starts on the 23rd, and November 8th, that's right, is Election Day. So they're counting down the days. We non-candidates, we just go, well, we'll go vote, whenever they tell us to go vote. So it's a really important election, of course, as they all are. So we encourage you to go out and vote on November 8th. So that's going to do it for our political forum this afternoon.